Welcome. Today, we're undertaking a focused exploration of a truly complex and ultimately tragic figure in American environmental history, Timothy Treadwell.
That's right. For 13 summers, he lived among wild brown bears.
In the remote parts of Katmai National Park, Alaska, he was documenting his life, cultivating this deep, as we'll see, incredibly controversial bond with these apex predators.
And the story of Timothy Treadwell is famous, I think, mostly because of how it ended, its devastating conclusion.
Exactly. On October 5th, 2003, Treadwell and his companion, Amie Huguenard, were killed and partially consumed by a bear.
But our goal today isn't just to recount that well-known story. Instead, we're going to be doing a really thorough analysis of the source material we have, the biographical accounts, the official reports, the research.
To understand the specific facts.
The specific facts, his complex motivations, his methods, which, directly conflicted with professional safety protocols, and the very specific chain of events that culminated in this horrifying end.
It's a heavy subject, as you say. And when we examine a life like this, a boundary-pushing naturalist, we have to approach the facts with the seriousness and the sympathy they deserve.
Absolutely. Recognizing the profound loss for the victims and their families.
Our material really centers on a detailed biographical account. It charts his life, before he even found the bears, his 13 demanding years in Alaska, and then it drills down into the hour-by-hour timeline of that fatal encounter.
And what immediately stands out in the source material is the sheer drama of his character arc. I mean, we're looking at a man who successfully engineered a completely new identity, a new purpose.
A purpose so profound.
So profound that it basically overrode his own instinct for self-preservation. This intense focus placed him year after year on what you can only describe as an undeniable collision course with the unyielding biological realities of the natural world.
But this isn't just a story about a man and bears.
No, not at all. It's about transformation. It's about what looks like addiction transference, and it's about the real dangers of extreme anthropomorphism.
Okay, let's unpack the man we knew as Timothy Treadwell, starting with his life before he ever set foot in Katmai. He was born Timothy William Dexter.
Right, in Mineola, New York, back in 1957. And the sources paint a picture of an early life that was pretty rooted in conventional aspiration, high achievement, especially in athletics.
He was a star athlete.
A very high achiever, yes.
Yeah.
He attended Connecticut High School, where he was the star diver on the swimming team. This talent was significant. It actually earned him a swimming and diving scholarship to Bradley University.
So you see this initial path, someone who is driven, disciplined.
Exactly. Capable of excelling in a really demanding, high-pressure field like competitive sports.
But that path seems to have fractured pretty dramatically after college. The sources detail this pivot to Los Angeles, a move driven by a completely different kind of ambition.
The acting bug.
He wanted to be an actor, and this is the stage where the identity of Timothy Dexter starts to show some real vulnerability.
It's the defining struggle of his 20s. And the sources cite a truly specific and frankly a painful detail that seems to be the major catalyst for his decline.
What was it?
Treadwell lost the role of Woody Boyd in the sitcom Cheers. The role, of course, went to Woody Harrelson instead.
The role of Woody Boyd. That specific loss. It seems on the surface almost disproportionate to the outcome that followed.
You'd think so. But according to his father, this rejection from Cheers was a profound blow. A blow to his sense of self, his destiny, his identity. The source material states this event caused him to spiral down and do so rapidly.
Leading to
the development of a severe alcohol abuse disorder. The loss of that highly visible public-facing destiny in Hollywood, it created a vacuum.
Yeah.
A vacuum that desperately needed to be filled.
And that need for reinvention, that explains the formal change that comes next. In 1987, he legally changed his surname.
From Dexter to Treadwell.
Which was a family name he'd already been using informally. But this is more than just a name change, isn't it? It feels like a conscious legal break from that failed identity. The aspiring actor, the struggling athlete.
It's precisely that. It's an exercise in self-recreation. But the ultimate catalyst for the mission we all know him for came a little later. As he details in his own book, Among Grizzlies, the real rock-bottom moment was surviving a near-fatal heroin overdose in the late 1980s.
And here's where that personal crisis and his ultimate mission just become inextricably linked. That near-death experience seems to have functioned as the necessary shock, maybe a spiritual catalyst for finding a radically different purpose.
It's crucial we spend time on this connection because it defines his entire approach to conservation, to the bears. Treadwell explicitly stated that his entire recovery from both drug and alcohol addictions was, in his mind, attributable to his relationship with the bears.
The bear saved him.
In his narrative, yes. He believed that after his very first encounter with a wild bear, he knew he had found his calling, and that his destiny was now completely entwined with theirs.
So his devotion wasn't just a passion for wildlife conservation in the abstract. It was. It was personal salvation. It was, as the source analysis suggests, a kind of replacement addiction.
If you look at it through a psychological framework, it exhibits all the patterns of transference, the intensity, the tunnel vision, the willingness to sacrifice everything, personal safety, comfortable living. It mirrored the all-consuming nature of addiction.
The high he was chasing wasn't chemical anymore.
No, it was spiritual, it was existential. He replaced a destructive dependency on substances with a life-affirming yet, as we now know, a highly dangerous dependency on the validation he felt he received from his proximity to these magnificent wild animals.
And if his whole purpose was rooted in that personal salvation, how did that affect his judgment, his ability to accept professional guidance on safety?
It made him essentially impervious to criticism. If the bears were his destiny, his recovery, his entire reason for being, then anyone like the National Park Service who suggested he use deterrence or maintain distance, they were perceived as actively interfering with his salvation.
So they weren't just giving safety advice.
In his mind, they were challenging the very foundation of his sobriety and his purpose. And this is why his devotion was so absolute, but his methodology was so fatally flawed. Because he could not or would not conceive of the possibility that the animals he loved might not reciprocate that very complex, very human emotion.
With this intense, all-consuming personal mission now in place, Treadwell began his Alaskan expeditions in 1990. For 13 consecutive summers, right up until 2003, he dedicated his life to living among these coastal brown bears.
Specifically, the subspecies Ursus arctos, a formidable animal, and all within Katmai National Park and Preserve.
This was a monumental commitment. We're talking about months at a time in extreme isolation, often facing treacherous weather, and always with the constant, inherent risk of living in the heart of apex predator territory.
Over these years, he developed a really personalized geography within the park. He even had his own names for his different camping locations.
Let's focus on those locations for a moment, because the shift between them seems to illuminate his increasing comfort level, or maybe his increasing tolerance for risk.
That's a great point. Early in the season, he favored an open area of bear grass in Hallow Bay. He called it the Big Green, or, more affectionately, the Grizzly Sanctuary.
The sanctuary, what was the significance of that spot?
Well, Sanctuary was important because it was an open environment, you had good visibility. It was where he often encountered the bears he claimed to know well, the ones he had named and interacted with over multiple seasons. That open space offered a natural degree of safety, right? A bear approaching could be seen from a distance.
But later in the summer, he would move. He'd change locations to an area that it sounds inherently more dangerous. An expanse of especially thick brush in Kaflia Bay that he called the Grizzly Maze.
And the term maze is appropriate. This location was deep in the thicket. It intersected directly with active, high-traffic bear trails. The shift to the maze dramatically increased his proximity to the bears, it decreased his visibility, and it exponentially lowered the response time he'd have if surprised by an animal.
Why make that shift? Why go somewhere more dangerous?
As the seasons progressed, the bears he was familiar with would often move deeper inland to follow food sources or start preparing for torpor. So it seems he was forced to move deeper to be near them, which put him closer to transient, unfamiliar bears that were just passing through the area.
And during this time, he's also professionalizing his mission. He co-founds the organization Grizzly People with his co-worker and longtime companion, Jewel Palavac.
Right, and the group was dedicated to protecting the bears and their habitat. His work generated this impressive amount of raw documentation. We're talking nearly 100 hours of video footage, thousands of photographs.
And that footage is really the centerpiece of his legacy, but it also contains the absolute core of the controversy.
His philosophy of trust.
Exactly. Treadwell's central claim, which he repeats in his book and all through his video narratives, was that he practiced non-aggression, that he built a unique standing relationship with these animals. He named them like Mr. Chocolate or Snoopy, and claimed a sense of mutual trust and respect had developed over years.
And he wasn't just observing from a safe distance. The footage shows him getting incredibly close, sometimes just feet away. There are documented claims of him touching bears or approaching cubs.
Behavior that professional naturalists would universally condemn.
And this is where that biological reality just diverges so sharply from his personal narrative. The consensus among wildlife biologists is that naming and interacting with wild animals in this way is the epitome of anthropomorphism,
Assigning human qualities to them.
assigning human qualities and emotions like trust or respect to creatures that are governed purely by biological imperative. In the wild, familiarity does not equal friendship. It often only equals habituation, which can lead to tragedy for both the human and the animal. By getting them used to human proximity, he was unknowingly putting those very bears at risk of a lethal encounter with other people, should they lose their natural fear.
And yet, for over a decade, this highly controversial method allowed him to produce incredibly compelling content. He gained significant public recognition.
Oh, absolutely. By 2001, his notoriety secured him major media appearances. He was positioned as an environmental activist. He was on the Discovery Channel, The Late Show with David Letterman, Dateline NBC.
The media loved the story, The Man Who Lived with Bears.
It provided incredible visual drama. But it's also important to remember, while his footage often implied he was this solitary figure out there in the wilderness, the sources confirm he wasn't always alone. Amie Huguenard, his girlfriend, and other female companions who dated him often accompanied him. You can hear them behind the camera in a lot of the footage from his later summers.
So this collaboration provided a crucial level of support and documentation for him.
It did, but it also expanded the circle of risk.
Now, if you look objectively at the source material, the tragedy of October 2003, it wasn't a total surprise to the professional community.
Not at all.
The phrase "not unpredictable" was used by a key expert we'll get to. And the National Park Service, the NPS, they expressed constant worry about Treadwell's high-risk behavior almost from the very start of his expeditions in 1990.
The conflict between Treadwell and the NPS was systemic. It was ongoing. The sources detail a consistent, documented pattern of violations that spanned the entire decade. Between 1994 and 2003, NPS rangers cited Treadwell for at least 6 specific violations of park regulations.
It's important we go beyond just saying there were violations. What were they specifically, and what was the gravity of these mistakes that he was repeatedly making in bear country?
Well, let's detail the major ones because they really illustrate this fundamental clash between his personal mission and established safety protocol.
Okay.
First, guiding tourists without a license. This just shows a disregard for the commercial and safety regulations the park imposes.
Right.
Second, exceeding the 7-day camping limit. This rule is in place specifically to prevent the habituation of bears to human camp locations. You don't want them associating an area with a persistent food source. By staying longer, Treadwell was effectively training the bears to expect human presence and potentially human food.
And improper food storage. In bear country, that's maybe the most serious safety failure.
It's rule number 1. The whole purpose of storing food properly in bear-resistant containers, far away from your tent, is to prevent bears from associating humans with a meal. When a bear successfully gets human food, it learns to seek out humans. And the Park Service, in those cases, often has to euthanize that bear.
So he was creating dangerous problem bears.
He was. And finally, wildlife harassment and conflicts. His repeated intentional close proximity constituted harassment. It was an interference with their natural processes, forcing wildlife to alter their behavior simply because he was there.
The systemic risk he created was immense. He was, in effect, teaching these wild animals that boundaries didn't exist and undermining the very protection the NPS was trying to enforce for everyone else in the park.
And critically, on top of all that, he persistently refused to implement basic, non-lethal, life-saving measures that are just. Their standard operating procedure in any environment with apex predators.
Such as?
He refused to install an electric fence around his camp,
Mm.
and he refused to carry bear spray as a deterrent.
An electric fence provides a safe, non-lethal psychological barrier. It's standard. Why the absolute refusal?
The refusal was philosophical. It's tied directly back to his personal salvation narrative. The sources, including his own accounts, confirm he viewed these safety measures as an affront to his special relationship with the bears.
He actually wrote about this, didn't he?
He did. In his book, Among Grizzlies, he recounts one single occasion, back in 1997, where he did resort to using bear mace. He wrote that he experienced terrible grief afterward. He felt this immense guilt over the pain he perceived it had caused the bear. And that emotional anthropomorphic response cemented his refusal to ever carry or use deterrence again.
That one moment encapsulates the entire conflict. His deep emotional commitment was being prioritized over the objective physical safety of himself and anyone with him.
Exactly. And this is where we can bring in the external expert voices from the sources. The naturalist Charlie Russell, who spent years studying bears in Russia, actually advised Treadwell specifically on this. He told him to use pepper spray and electric fences.
And what was Russell's take on him?
Russell had a nuanced view, perhaps surprisingly. While he was deeply critical of Treadwell's failure to follow basic safety, stating he was playing chicken with the animals, Russell also praised his devotion. He praised his unprecedented ability to spend so much time so close to the bears without incident for over a decade.
So if Russell praised his devotion but criticized the safety measures, does the source material suggest Treadwell was an effective advocate, or was he just a lucky showman for 13 years? That feels like a critical distinction.
That is the essential ambiguity of his legacy. For 13 years he was successful, which led many people to believe his methods actually worked. This success reinforces that showman element, especially given his background and performance. But the sources suggest the outcome was due less to his unique bond and more to, well, to luck, combined with the fact that he was primarily interacting with bears who had become familiar with his scent and presence.
And when an unfamiliar bear arrived, as was the case in 2003, the luck ran out.
That's the theory. And the most definitive condemnation comes from Tom Smith, a research ecologist with the U.S. Geological Survey's Alaska Science Center. Smith didn't mince words at all.
What did he say?
Smith was unequivocal. He stated that Treadwell was breaking every park rule that there was in terms of distance to the bears, harassing wildlife, and interfering with natural processes. He characterized Treadwell's entire mission as being fundamentally at odds with the Park Service.
Because their goals were completely different.
Completely. The NPS's goal is to maintain the wild nature of the park and keep wildlife wild. Treadwell was actively trying to domesticate or socialize them to his presence.
And Smith's final chilling conclusion, that Treadwell's death was not unpredictable.
Yes, that speaks to the systemic long-term risk created by his choices. It suggests that statistically, given his disregard for safety, a fatal encounter was really a matter of when, not if.
We absolutely must turn our attention now to Amie Huguenard, who tragically perished alongside Treadwell.
Yes. Amie was born in 1965. She was a highly educated physician assistant. She was Treadwell's girlfriend and his companion on that final fatal expedition to Katmai.
And what makes Amie's story so painful, so tragic, is the documented fact that she was not a willing, comfortable participant in this risk.
No, she wasn't. The source material, particularly information that came out during the research for the Grizzly Man documentary, which referenced her diaries, confirmed that Amie Huguenard genuinely feared bears. She felt deeply uncomfortable being in such close proximity to them.
This is a point that requires profound reflection and sympathy. Her final journal entries, which were later accessed, indicated her absolute desire to leave Katmai.
She was extending her stay in an environment that caused her constant acute fear, and she was doing it solely to accompany Treadwell on his passion project. This introduces a whole other layer of relational tragedy that really overshadows the environmental risk.
And this fear leads us directly to the critical, ill-timed decision that sealed their fate. They had actually followed their routine. They returned to Kodiak on September 26th. They stored their gear.
And they were preparing to catch their flight home to California for the winter. The trip was, for all intents and purposes, over.
But a mundane logistical issue derailed everything.
It did. Treadwell got into an argument with an airline ticket agent. It was about the cost of altering their return ticket. A stressful, frustrating interaction over a relatively small sum of money, but it seems to have been a tipping point for him.
So instead of just paying the fee or dealing with the stress, he makes a sudden, impulsive decision. On September 29th, he and Huguenard chartered a plane to return to the remote campsite.
For what he declared would be one more week.
And what was the primary motivation for going back?
Treadwell wanted to locate a specific, favorite female brown bear, one he had named. He was worried about her before leaving for the season and felt compelled to go back and ensure her safety.
Prioritizing this emotional concern over the immediate safety of himself and his fearful companion.
Exactly. And that decision to return for an extra week was disastrously ill-timed because of the specific environmental context of October 2003 in Katmai. They were deep in the park, later in the year than he typically stayed, and later than most of the bears he knew remained.
This late timing was exceptionally dangerous for several biological reasons, which the sources highlight very clearly. We should explain these concepts to really understand the risk.
Yes, we must. The first is hyperphagia.
Okay, let's unpack that. What is hyperphagia?
Hyperphagia is a state bears enter in the autumn. It translates roughly to excessive eating. Bears become frantic to maximize their fat reserves. They need to consume somewhere between 15 and 20,000 calories a day to survive the impending winter torpor.
So this desperate drive makes them singularly focused.
Incredibly aggressive toward competitors and far less tolerant of any perceived intrusion or obstacle, whether it's human or another animal.
And adding to that biological urgency was the specific ecological condition of that particular year.
That's right. The sources confirmed that food was scarce that autumn. The salmon run had been poor, or had already passed, which meant the bears were under intense pressure. This combination peak hyperphagia, coinciding with low food availability, meant the bears they encountered were stressed, intensely motivated, and significantly more aggressive than the animals Treadwell might have seen in June or July.
And crucially, the bears he was familiar with, the named ones he claimed this bond with, they had already moved on, or were entering their dens.
That is the pivotal factor in this attack. The bears moving into the area late in the season were typically transient animals from other parts of the park, animals who had no history of interaction with Timothy Treadwell.
So they saw a late-season campsite, possibly associated it with food because of his past improper storage.
And they viewed the humans purely as competitors,
Yep.
or as prey, devoid of any relationship that he believed he had cultivated over the years.
We even have a chilling premonition of this from Treadwell's final filmed footage. It was recorded just hours before the attack.
That's right. He filmed a specific bear diving for salmon, and in that footage, he actually expresses that he felt uncomfortable around that particular animal. He noted its unfamiliarity and its intensity.
So he felt the shift. He recognized the danger in that specific bear's demeanor, recognized it was a stranger that wasn't playing by his rules.
He did, which underscores the tragic irony of it all. He recognized the risk, but because of his overriding emotional commitment to staying, he failed to translate that recognition into the one action that mattered: packing up and leaving immediately.
The timeline of the attack itself is drawn from precise records. Around noon on Sunday, October 5th, 2003, Treadwell spoke with an associate in Malibu, California on his satellite phone.
Yes, and he reported that all was well. He said he hadn't encountered any problems with the bears.
So sometime after that call, the attack must have occurred. The discovery was made the following day, Monday, October 6th.
That's when the Kodiak air taxi pilot, Willie Fulton, arrived for the prearranged pickup. Fulton knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. He found the campsite abandoned, a tent was partially collapsed, and there was a large brown bear guarding the immediate vicinity.
He swiftly contacted park rangers.
He did, and the rangers began a very solemn investigation. They quickly discovered the couple's remains. We'll recount these necessary facts with gravity, focusing on the documentation of the scene.
Okay.
Treadwell's disfigured head, a partial spine, and his right forearm and hand, with his distinctive wristwatch still on, were recovered a short distance from the campsite.
Then Amie Huguenard.
Amie Huguenard's partial remains were found closer to the collapsed tents, and alarmingly, they had been partially buried in a mound of soil and twigs. This burial behavior suggests a bear was attempting to cache the remains for later consumption.
Confirming predatory intent.
Yes. The investigation immediately required the removal of the threat, and 2 bears were killed during the response.
The first one was the bear guarding the camp.
Right. The primary animal killed was a large male bear, later identified as Bear 141. It was actively protecting the campsite and the area where the remains were found. Rangers had to shoot it when it exhibited extreme aggression and charged the group. A second, adolescent bear was killed shortly after, when it also charged the investigating rangers.
The forensic evidence here was crucial in establishing causality.
Absolutely. An immediate on-site necropsy of the large male, Bear 141, revealed definitive evidence. Human body parts, including fingers and limbs, as well as remnants of clothing, were found in its stomach.
So that confirmed conclusively that this specific bear was the primary aggressor?
Yes, responsible for the deaths of both Treadwell and Huguenard. The younger bear was consumed by other animals before a necropsy could be performed, but its secondary involvement was suspected.
And beyond the remains, the most crucial piece of evidence recovered was the video camera. It wasn't just there, it was operating during the attack.
The camera recorded the entire event, but with a critical caveat. The lens cap was still on. This seemingly small detail is vital for understanding the sequence of events. It suggests that Treadwell and Huguenard were likely in the middle of setting up for another filming sequence when the attack began.
Oh, we're distracted.
Focused on their equipment and unprepared. If they had just been relaxing, the camera would likely have been put away.
And the recorded audio. It runs for approximately 6 minutes before the tape ends. It documents the entire attack. It is, understandably, extremely difficult to process.
The audio is harrowing, and it provides a moment-by-moment account of the terror. It begins with Treadwell's panicked scream, "Come out here! I'm being killed out here!" The analysis of the recording indicates the speed and the brutality of the attack.
And Amie Huguenard, she's on the recording as well.
She is. You can hear her attempting to respond to the crisis. Initially, she instructs Treadwell to play dead, which is often the advice given in a defensive encounter with a bear. But it's tragically the wrong advice when dealing with a predatory attack.
And her next actions were heroic, though ultimately fatal.
She is heard attempting to intervene physically, screaming and attacking the bear to try and defend Treadwell. It demonstrates immense courage in the face of just insurmountable danger. The recording ends shortly after that, capturing the chilling sounds of the bear carrying Treadwell off into the thicket and their final moments.
The historical context here just adds another layer to this tragedy. Despite the high concentration of brown bears in Katmai and the long history of human presence there, this was the first known incident of a person being killed by a bear in the entire 85-year history of Katmai National Park and Preserve.
That fact alone is stark. It underlines the extraordinary nature of the circumstances. It wasn't that Katmai was inherently too dangerous for humans. It was this specific, unusual combination of factors. The late season, the lack of food, the presence of transient bears, Treadwell's refusal of deterrence, and the unfortunate timing of the attack while they were preoccupied with their camera. All of that created the conditions for this unique and fatal outcome.
Following the investigation and the immense media attention around the tragedy, the organization Treadwell had founded, Grizzly People, they actively sought to shape his legacy.
They did. They argued that his controversial presence actually served a vital protective function for the bears.
They advanced a specific claim, didn't they?
Yes, asserting that 5 bears were allegedly poached in the year following his death. They contrasted this with their claim that no bears had been poached in that specific area, while Treadwell was present during those 13 summers. It was used as a powerful, emotional justification for the extreme risk he undertook.
But the sources we have provide necessary factual context that challenges that direct protective impact he was claimed to have had.
Indeed. Court records that were reported by the Anchorage Daily News introduced a critical counter-detail. These records indicated that the alleged poaching incidents occurred along a place called Funnel Creek,
which is an area where there is no evidence that Treadwell ever camped or established a persistent presence.
Exactly. Which suggests that while poaching may have tragically occurred, the claim that Treadwell's physical presence was actively deterring poachers across the whole park it's factually shaky, at least concerning those documented incidents.
Regardless of the poaching controversy, I think the most enduring part of his legacy is undoubtedly the 2005 documentary from the legendary filmmaker Werner Herzog,
Grizzly Man.
Grizzly Man. The film relied so heavily on Treadwell's extensive, highly intimate video footage, combined with interviews from people who knew him.
Herzog had an unparalleled vault of material to work with, and his praise for the sheer quality and intimacy of Treadwell's footage is widely noted. It provided an unprecedented, unfiltered look into the lives of these animals and Treadwell's relationship with them. No other footage quite like it existed.
However, the film is really defined by this central, profound philosophical disagreement between the subject and the director.
That disagreement is the film's intellectual core. Treadwell viewed nature as harmonious. He was seeking order and love and mutual respect. He anthropomorphized the bears. He saw them as kindly fellow creatures.
And Herzog.
Herzog, on the other hand, explicitly disagreed with this romanticized view. Herzog's commentary in the film suggests that the wilderness is inherently chaotic, indifferent, and brutal. It's a realm of overwhelming, objective biological forces that are completely divorced from human concepts of trust or affection.
That distinction is paramount. Treadwell projected his own need for salvation onto the bears. Herzog viewed the wilderness as pure, unyielding anarchy. And that intellectual friction is what makes the documentary so compelling. It elevates it beyond just a tragic news story.
And this story generated so much interest that the analysis of his life continued well after the film. The documentation of Treadwell's later years led to spin-off miniseries that further used his records. Things like the Grizzly Man diaries, an 8-episode series that chronicled the last decade of his life using his diary entries, footage, and photographs.
And another one called Diary of the Grizzly Man.
Yes, which also relied heavily on his original footage, supplemented by the diary readings.
So ultimately, analyzing all of this source material, from his early life setbacks to the NPS warnings to the forensic details of the attack, it illustrates a profound, multifaceted story. It's an intersection of human passion, severe personal risk born from a search for identity, and the unyielding, impersonal realities of the natural world.
Treadwell saw destiny and redemption in the wilderness. He was filling a profound personal void. But his fatal flaw was the failure to create a boundary between his deep emotional need and the objective biological imperatives of the animals he claimed to protect. He loved the bears, but he fundamentally misunderstood the inherent nature of their wildness and the critical importance of keeping that wildness intact.
So in concluding this analysis, we've covered the entire complex character arc. Timothy Dexter's transformation into Timothy Treadwell, the psychological roots of his mission as a form of recovery.
The clear conflict between his personal approach and established park safety regulations.
And the specific tragic circumstances, exacerbated by late-season timing, scarce food, and that ill-fated decision to return, that culminated in the devastating loss of both his life and Amie Huguenard's in Katmai.
And this brings us to a final provocative thought that we must consider, one that's rooted in the tragic facts documented about Amie Huguenard's state of mind.
Okay.
Given her fear of bears and her final journal entries indicating her profound discomfort and her desire to leave the park facts clearly established in the source materials, how much responsibility does one person bear for influencing another to stay in an environment where they express profound fear and discomfort, especially when that environment is known to be hostile and carries obvious lethal risk?
It's a challenging question.
It is, and it highlights the complex relational dynamics that were intertwined with the pursuit of his personal extreme risk.
A deeply unsettling question and absolutely essential context for this story. Thanks for listening.